think it's worth watching. The big takedown.
Because give that heartwarming glow.
We review movies individually all the time. This time, we're going to look at the Ghostbusters franchise, rate each movie individually, and then at the end, we're going to give you what we think of the franchise in its own score.
Welcome to Frame Rate Studios, where we love to talk all things movies. I'm Chad, and seated to my left is a man who would never answer yes to whether he was a god. It's my friend Corey.
True.
Well, I know you're a very devout man and a believer, and that's part of the reason, but you're also not a god. You know that, right?
Okay, so we're going to start off with the one that started it all, 1984, Ghostbusters. You got any opening thoughts?
Yeah, I have some opening thoughts. We've
Okay.
talked about this before. This one holds a very special place in my heart because, give that heartwarming glow. My parents, for whatever reason, decided to take a 6-year-old me to Ghostbusters, and I was forever changed. Because it was my first actual live-action, real adult movie to go to, and it completely blew me away.
Is that physically possible?
It was the first VHS tape we ever owned, and I watched it so many times that we broke the first one, or I broke the first one.
Rewatching it, everything just holds strong.
Yep.
Still.
Yep.
Well, except for the effects in some areas. But when you look at them for that time frame, there's still a nostalgic feeling to them. You don't want them to be good. And the other thing was, like I always talk about, one of the things I like is they were practical.
Correct.
So much of it was practical effects, and when you look into the way they are done, it's amazing what they do, and it was also chock full of one-liners.
Oh, yeah.
What is your favorite?
Oh, boy. My favorite is probably...
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
You know, that has always been just the way... All of that, pretty much that whole, prison cell scene is just fantastic. But just, the way Murray delivers his lines and just does such a great job, that has to be my favorite. For you, which would be yours?
Mine still, it came at towards the end is...
Ray has gone bye-bye, Egon.
One other thing I want to mention that is so amazing about it is the soundtrack.
Oh,
the soundtrack
yes.
is just great.
Yes.
In the other movies, I don't pull out going, oh, I'm going to be excited to hear that sound. This, every single one, I'm like, oh, yeah. And I had the cassette.
Yeah, no, that was one of the notes. I'm sorry I didn't, but yes. And trust me, I'm going to mention the music later for another one of them, and it's not congratulatory to that movie. But then even the score was just, it was done and it fit right and fit the tone just right. You've said it before in other episodes or when we've talked, when the music kind of becomes a character, helps kind of set the tone of the scene, they got it right.
I find it completely interesting as
Yes.
how big the Stay Puft Marshmallow was and how much he became an icon.
Uh-huh.
They didn't start producing real marshmallows of those until 2010.
Yeah.
Really? Really?
Well, start us off, sir.
Okay, since it was so enjoyable and it's so nostalgic, and I think it just stands the test of time, even though, it's 40 years old, it's still, maybe it's suitable for it since it came out in the 80s. It's 80.
Nice. I went a little bit higher. I gave it a 91. This is a near perfect comedy. Murray is at the top of his game, but it's because he's got other people that are great to play off of, a great soundtrack, lots of good one-liners. And the thing I didn't really touch on, but will say that it was able to somehow find that right balance between spooky and funny. And it just, knocked it out of the park for me. I think if we're choosing 4 movies to be on our Mount Rushmore, this probably has earned a place for me.
Before we move on, and since you said this is such a childhood favorite of yours.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Okay.
I have a couple trivia questions for you.
No questions.
You at home, I want you to play along.
Okay, wasn't expecting this.
There are 4 Ghostbuster logos.
Oh, good grief, yeah?
Which one's the real one?
Oh, come on. Oh,
Are you a real
this is-
Ghostbuster
Wow,
fan?
probably not this much of one, man. I'm looking at this. Good grief. I believe it's the one you've got marked with Egon.
You at home, put it down in the comments which one you think.
Next question, please.
Another question is...
Yes.
This is just a bonus question.
Yeah.
In some ways. Slimer's name is not Slimer.
Correct.
What is his real name?
That's the part I don't know. I know that Slimer was added after the fact.
Okay. Well, do you know?
Sorry, I'm letting you guys down.
Guess also. But I'll go ahead and tell you this one. Onionhead.
Oh, yes. Okay, thank you.
Slimer is mentioned in the first movie. I
When?
believe this is where he gets his name, probably.
When? I know Pete says he slimed me, but I don't remember them saying Slimer.
Ray is showing Winston about
Where we
the
store all
trap
the
when he
vapors
says,
and entities and slimers that we trap.
Why don't you start Ghostbusters 2?
as I told you,
Yeah.
I actually went back and I had to watch it twice because I'm sitting here going, did I miss something?
You and me both, pal.
Because the explanation of why Vigo is in the painting
Yeah.
and is coming is not very clear. It's kind
Correct.
of left for you to like read between the lines. What's the slime? The pig
Correct.
slime have to do with anything? There's just too many questions that are left.
I now understand why I watched this once and was like, never again.
I feel you, bud.
So, I mentioned the music earlier, right? For Ghostbusters. This is the one I was talking about. The music is awful. It just, the scene where it plays off the worst, and really the scene that pretty much encapsulates what is so bad about this movie in total, the courtroom scene. The music is awful, the acting is awful, the comedy is awful. The acting is overacting. The judge,
On top of the judge, is what you're saying, one of him being overacting, he was kind of a character, is adding, whatever his name is, Dr. Jonas?
oh yeah, yeah, Janos.
Janos. He was too much of a character.
Yes.
And you already have Lewis and Janine.
Yeah.
You don't need any more.
You basically had the Janos character. You've got it basically, from looking into it, they tried too hard because the real Ghostbusters had become such a thing, to make it more in a certain way family friendly and friendly and tone some things down. And in doing it, it just turned it into.
I think the only real laugh that I can remember was when Peter started like insulting the baby.
You're short, your belly button sticks out too far, and you're a terrible burden on your poor mother.
I think the baby stole the movie.
It did, because nobody else was. It was just really, at the end of the day, it was such a departure from the first one, and so it was just hard to stomach, I think, is really what it came down to me. And I got a lot of stomach, so oof, yeah. So it was rough on me.
So
do you want me to lead off on the second one?
Because maybe I might lift it up. I might lift it up a little bit.
Yeah, you might lift it up a little bit. I have one word, and I think you can tell. Just awful. Didn't need to be made, doesn't need to exist. There isn't anything good about it, in my opinion. The story's all over the place. The rules aren't consistent. It was just a cash grab for Sony. Yeah, I gave it 19.
Unfortunately, it has its predecessor that makes it even look worse than what it is. That is difficult. Yes, too much humor that just did not work. And when your infant child is the best actor, best performer, it doesn't vogue well. Vogue well?
Strike a pose.
My score, better than Chad's, but still nothing super great, 47.
How about we move on to Afterlife?
Well, thank God that's over with.
Let me start off by saying that Afterlife, it had a lot more spirit to it.
Yes. Nice. Yeah, Afterlife was got back to a good base level. I liked the direction of the story in the sense of it's a family story. You know, the whole goal is obviously was to keep this going. So in order to keep this franchise going, you have to get a new fan base involved. And, you know, I'm sorry, I'm 46 now.
This dude's pushing 50!
It was a nice way to bring those of us in who'd been there from the beginning, but try to create something new for a new fan base to come along that could find something new to find in this.
One of the other things I enjoyed for it was they went back to some practical effects.
Exactly.
And you got to enjoy that type of art. I think people can act better against these props better, so you get better performances.
Yeah.
I sure said better a lot. I better make sense with that.
No, not really, no.
I also felt more of the original score.
Yes.
It just drew you
Yep.
back into it. Drew you into it and like, okay, I'm back in 1984.
Exactly. You know, I thought it was a good job done by the cast. I think the standout performance was by the girl who played Phoebe, McKenna Grace. She does a fantastic job. I thought Finn did a good job. Finn Wolfhard as Trevor, as her brother.
One question I was going to ask you.
Yes.
Do you know who portrayed Egon?
No. Who did?
Do you know the name Bob Gunton?
No, not for sure.
He played Warden Norton.
Oh, he's the one who played him?
Yep.
Sweet. Sorry, Shawshank Redemption reference. That is another movie on my Mount Rushmore.
Okay, good start, good start.
Should we give the score on this one?
Yeah, let's move into it. So I'm the lead on this one. Overall, this was, as much as I sort of had some challenges, this was a fun and enjoyable ride. It was a especially great way to resurrect the series after Ghostbusters 2 and that misstep. You know, with some newness to draw in new audiences, things like that. The story was fairly good. The fan service was great for a while, but about 2/3 of the way through, could have done with let's just focus on the story. But at the end of the day, it gets kind of an average score for me. I gave it a 65.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great fan service, as we were saying. It does pay off bringing Gozer back. It's not just a bad plug. It was nice to see him go back to practical effects. The characters were a nice addition. It just didn't have the same feel, complete heart and feel of the original. So my score, 68.
Yeah. And I think that's about where it fits, in my opinion. Obviously, I gave it 65. I got a problem with getting the last word, folks, and I don't know why.
You might want to see someone about that.
So, let's move on to Frozen Empire.
A negative side to it is it was too long. I thought the beginning of it was really good, but once, right about the time that Patton Oswalt's character showed up, his character was involved too long.
Yes.
Way too much explanation of the backstory for Goraka. What I will give it props for is it starts off right away. It's a pretty intense beginning. I mean, even though it starts back in 1908, I think it was. 04. It's just like,
well, that was disturbing.
To me, the problem with this movie is they lost the point of trying to keep the story compact and to the point that it was about either whatever they were going to choose for it to be about. I don't care, but either it's about, it's about Phoebe growing up. They lost the thread on that and lost any thread on the family element.
And let me tell you something. It's all about family.
Okay, this isn't jiving here because the other problem was in Afterlife, Winston complains about the state that Ecto-1 is in. So why is Ecto-1, and Winston has all this money, why is Ecto-1 basically falling apart at the beginning of the movie? Makes no sense. Basically, I'm sorry, didn't we all experience, all of us as Ghostbusters, not us, but the characters in the movie, at least the old ones, didn't we experience what happened the last time the containment unit had an issue?
Hey, okay, we get the point.
And they just kind of act like, whatever. I don't know. It's like, I'm sorry, I'd be a little more concerned. Because for me, watching that first one, that was huge. Like, watching that thing blow was a huge moment, and it was like awesome and scary at the same time. And then that they're just kind of like, I don't know. And then is that Winston just kind of has all this fun, cool tech hidden off to the side and doesn't bother to share with the people that are actually out fighting the ghosts that they have any of it. Those are the story elements those are the parts to why the story just didn't completely lose me. It's not off. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not Ghostbusters 2.
Wow. That's something.
I can kind of lead us into it unless you had other points into kind of final thoughts from doing all that. You're like, go, man. At the end of the day, I think why I got so, it was at the end of the movie and I'm just like, yeah, I just want this to be over with. It wasn't as bad as Ghostbusters 2 by any means, but really what I said about it was, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just meh. There is some good humor in there from Kamal Nanjiani and Paul Rudd, but there's not enough of it. It's just inconsistent tone, convenient ways things work just so that it, okay, it just happens to work out and makes the rules make things work when you do. So, with all that, I gave Frozen Empire a 47.
My final thoughts start with, it's too long. Whereas in Ghostbusters 2, there was not enough information. This one went too far. And it's like, I don't need to know all this and that and everything. It's enjoyable for the comedy that is in it when it is funny. The new characters kind of add to it. But really, it just comes down to it's too long. So all the negative there, I will say it's still enjoyable. I will go back and watch it again. But I will still say my score is only a 63.
And so, in conclusion,
It was a long trip, but we made it there. There's our look and how we would rank each of the individual movies. Now, the question is, how does the franchise hold up?
Are you ready? Hey, are you ready for this?
Well, for me, this ultimately ends up that this franchise is it is a waste of time. Really, it only exists, and I get a franchise only exists because of the first movie, but when I say it only exists because of the first movie, all of the rest of them build off of references, fan service. I gave the overall franchise a score of 25.
So obviously he doesn't care for the franchise. I, on the other hand, still think there's something worthy to watching it. Maybe it's also because I have kids. I can see sitting down and watching and going through it with them and having some enjoyment with it. I think there is some good continuity through it. They didn't completely lose, have one track here and then something completely different. When it did lose track, it was within its own movie. So my score is way higher than his. Mine ended up being a 70. I think it's worth watching. The big takedown of it is, I think 3 out of the 4 I could watch.
I will, not trying to get the last word. The one thing I will...
Nope.